My presentation is titled Myth, the Mask, and Masquerade, Femininity, Performing Gender, Eumenides. In 1972, shortly after Corinthian censorship was lifted in Greece, Yannis Nicosia-Cyprus was published in a collection under the title The Fourth Dimension, assembling 16 dramatic models at the time, which took its final form with the addition of Ferda in 1978. Ritsa's recourse to myth in 12 of these points shows how literature in the second degree may become under conditions of totalitarianism the medium of a second root, which enables communist writers like him to invite allegorical interpretations of the poetry, especially within the rigid framework of the communist rule. However, the writing of his meaning, completed in two distinct phases, the first preceding the communist school and the second following the poet's release after 3 years of detention and house confinement, invites a holistic appreciation of the context which informs the fourth dimension. Comprising poems extending from the mid-50s to the late 70s, the collection epitomizes the evolution of Ritsa's poetic vision in the years that followed Stalin's death, especially after the violent reaffirmation of Soviet authority in Eastern Europe in the 1950s and late 60s. Myth then, or in Ritsa's own words, quote, the utmost avowal under the mask of the other, end quote, becomes both an encoded protest and a highly hypocritical gesture. Although the character of Ismene appears in a number of extant Greek tragedies related to the Theban cycle, the emergence of mythical occurrences in Ritsa's directly points to Sophocles' Antigone as his main intertext. Ritsa's embraces many aspects of Sophocles' play, but brings entirely new elements into the plot, a transformation which defines the identity of his text and deploys its potential meanings. This modernization consists first and foremost in the transposition of the play into a different genre, as well as an insignificant contraction in one act, framed by prologue and epilogue by way of stage directions. The story is entirely related from paging Ismene's point of view, addressing her monologue to the nude character of a young officer. Her recollection of memories implies that the drama has already taken place in a distant, undefinable past. The abandoning the established notions of space and time enables the myth to move freely between past and present, fiction and reality, individual experience and universality. However, when it comes to literary myth, this transhistorical dimension is reasonably permitted by historicity, which in Ritsa's regains its rise through various anachronisms, grounding the story in the deep technology. One might have thought that Ritsa's, following the logic of his Marxist views, would have opted for the figure of Antigone, who has been forged, especially by 20th century dramatists, as an iconic figure of resistance. Like Marxist playwright Bertolt Brecht, he could have raised Antigone as a revolutionary myth, or depict her as one of socialism's positive heroes, as he did in earlier collections with numerous female figures, to mention the heroic mother of the epitaph, modeled on Maxine Gorky's The Mother. Instead, Ritsa sought for Ismene, whose perspective has been silenced both by the tragic tradition and its later reception. This alteration is not incidental, for Ritsa's further shifts his chief thematic focus on the sororial rivalry rather than the Antigone-Cretan confrontation, which lies at the heart of the tragic action and has been foregrounded by both scholarly interpretation and the writings of Antigone. Hence, it is gender which provides the source of dramatic conflict in Ritsa's, and this no longer plays on some kind of masculinity-femininity dialectic, but rather on two different ethical stances that correspond to two radically opposed variations of womanness. Engaging postmodern feminist thought enables us to explore how Ritsa exposes the circumstances of the production of femininity within the political rationalities of both the Greek military junta and Soviet totalitarianism. I focus more particularly on the perspective of Lucy Rigaray and Judith Butler, in that they attribute certain theatricality to gender identity construction and raise significant issues that relate to personal agency. In doing so, both thinkers explore, albeit from different theoretical standpoints, the possibilities of social and subjective transformation. Their theories remain illuminating in my discussion of Ismene, for which it is very recourse both to the mythical persona and the genre of dramatic monologue, invites some kind of enactment which brings performative strategies along with Brechtian techniques to the aid of the text. way the status of the dramatis personae is transformed on the level of signification is thus placed at the center of the argument, for the absence of any reference to Sophocles' foremost scene of the laws shifts the attention from the fundamental to a rather peripheral confrontation of the tragic economy, namely the encounter between Ismene and Antigone. Both in Eumenes and Sophocles' sisterly rivalry foregrounds not a familial, but rather a political issue. It relates to a female's right to have the king's heard. Antigone, in willing to give burial rights to her brother Polynices against Creon's edict, is not just a transgression of civil law, but also of the behavioral patterns of her sex. The limits of the woman's behavior comportment can be traced in Sophocles' very opening scene, where Ismene, in her attempt to dissuade her sister from committing the deed, comes to rationalize and denaturalize her own submissive behavior. Remember, we are women. We're not born to contend with men. Them too are underlings ruled by stronger hands, so we must submit in this, and things still worse. Borrowing on this role-bound Sophoclean type, Eumenes presents an equally passive and obeying Ismene, caught up in the feminine ideal of beauty, as opposed to her sister, who refuses to fall medically in the same pattern. However, Ismene affirms her ostensible essential self as defined through what her foundationalist premises object and exclude. Oh, my sister settles all questions with it's either right or it isn't. I felt so sorry for her. She almost hurt me too. My sister, you see, was also ashamed of being a woman. Maybe that was her real misfortune, and perhaps that's why she died. As her monologue unfolds, Ismene finds her sister guilty of hubris for having sacrificed her wedding with Haman in the name of a cheap immortality, as she terms it. In invoking Antigone's lament on her way to her final habitat, where she was to be buried alive, Ismene recalls the Sophoclean passage where her sister's moral integrity appears to collapse before mortality. And all those words of hers, unwed, unbefriended, above all that, unwedded, were her only admission, her first fine humble gesture, her sole act of feminine daring, some sort of vindication for her embittered arrogance. In my eyes, that excused her. The otherwise elusive relation between Eumenes and Sophocles becomes here effective, for Ismene quotes precisely those words which in Sophocles' version shake Antigone's pride as she's led off to her tomb. However, while Antigone's significant change of tone in Sophocles rather highlights her profound humanity, Ismene places greater emphasis here on her sister's anguish, which portrays, to her eyes, a feminine, resigned bravery. In light of rigorous feminist intervention, the complex power workings to reach Ismene, both in Sophocles and Eumenes, comes to adopt a phallic position, become plainly evident. Indebted to Derrida's The Constructive Project, Foucault's discursively constructed subjectivity, and Lacan's psychoanalytic perspective, Irigaray denounces patriarchal structures which sustain logos, having excluded women from language and imported them into a monosexual economy of desire and representation. Interestingly, Irigaray exploits the theatre metaphor in order to interrogate the ways in which the scenography of dominant discourses renders this systematicity possible, denouncing thus: the architectonics of its theatre, its framing in space and time, its props, its actors, their respective positions, in deep but tragic relations, without overlooking a mirror that allows the logos, the subject, to reduplicate itself. Entrapped within this set of discursive arrangements, a woman has no choice, Irigaray argues, but to enter into the masquerade of femininity that is, in the value system, where she remains the object and not the subject of language and desire. Nonetheless, Irigaray recognizes the revolutionary potential of the masquerade, inasmuch as a playful repetition may disrupt the staging conventions and recuperate the feminine language. One must assume the feminine role deliberately, which means already to convert a form of subordination into affirmation, and thus to begin to thwart it. However ludic such a reenactment might seem, to take on a masquerade is Too much pain may be concealed, and so for its femininity becomes a woman's burial mask. Never had my sister looked so lovely as when she was dead. All by herself, her mid-tempered cheeks, heavily painted her lips bright crimson, made her eyes grow deep black huge with black-rimmed cork. She never made up herself. I hang 5 rows of necklaces on her to hide the scars along her throat, rings and bracelets, and a broad buckle from her belt. Made up and adorned this way, she inspired a curious resemblance to me. How like this Mimi she is, a girl whispered. Now she'd renounced her frightful decisions, her moral principles, all those stupid male goals and obsessions. By dying, she'd at last become a woman. By representing gender as a social practice rather than a causal effect of anatomical sex, Rito's echoes here with Beauvoir's famous assertion, one is not born, but rather becomes woman, which lays the groundwork for constructionist perspectives of gender identity. Across the Atlantic, Judith Butler departs precisely from Beauvoir's phenomenological account to ground her own understanding of the body as a product of acculturation. Like Irigaray, albeit from an anti-essentialist perspective, Butler explores the relation between power, language, and the body, and presents gender as a theatrical event as constituted through a series of performative acts. In her view, the body literally dramatizes its available conventions through a process of stylized repetition, as she terms it, which produces the illusory effect of an internal gender core. From this point of view, femininity in Mimi appears to be some kind of testamentary code under the guise of a naturalized law, or, as Baron Barthes puts it with regard to fashion in the fashion system, a supercode which words impose on the real garment. However, this Mimi science system produces neither garments nor fashion trends, but women, a set of identical others whose inglorious mythologies, as Barthes would have it, are meant to serve the interests of domination. Nevertheless, Butler keeps emphasizing that the body is not a mere object upon which such a semiology operates. Rather, the social agent participates in this engendering process as simultaneously acting and being acted upon. In exploring then the limits of agency, Butler protests Beauvoir's voluntaristic account of gender, as she puts it, which seems to postulate that identities can be chosen by some kind of cogito that remains ontologically distant from language and culture. Tied precisely to the problematic of essence and performativity, Butler revisits various psychoanalytic appropriations of the masquerade to raise the crucial question: who is the one that lies beneath the mask? Who is truly the doer behind the deed? By rejecting a rigorized sexual ontology, Butler provides an understanding of the masquerade as the very means by which gender and femininity is constituted, and a theory, says Butler, that makes itself as convincing as being. However, in her reading of Beauvoir's concept of becoming, Butler recognizes eventual spaces of agency and innovation. Indeed, to become a woman, both for Butler and Beauvoir, is based on an understanding of the body as both construct and freedom, facticity and project, a scene of culturally sedimented meanings and a field of possibilities. This kind of choice opens up the subject to multiple resignifications and enables one to see the self, to the Expicolian and Christian phraseology, as an artwork in process. For Butler, then, the other woman is not one to be unveiled, as Irigaray suggests, but rather one to be invented. In the very character of gender as performative and thus contingent, Butler argues, resides the possibility of enacting the self differently. In exploring precisely the potential of subversive performatives, Butler offers a discussion of drag and cross-dressing as ultimately theatrical, mimetic, and parodic, in that they expose the imitative structure of gender as a prototype that lacks originality. Her final remarks constitute an ideal locus for the exploration of Rita's staging of cross-dressing, which significantly troubles gender and plays around the boundaries of sexual difference. One night, boys and girls were playing and dancing together, and someone had an inspiration. Let's change clothes. make the boys wear the girls' dresses, and let us have their male attire. There was a strange fulfillment, an awkward freedom in this exchange. We were like strangers to ourselves, yet at the same time real and honest. Only my sister staying in her own black dress, reproving and repugnant. The girls in their red clothes were bolder than the boys. While Antigone does not have to perform, for she really is her own masculine values, Ismene only dares to display her masculinity only when masked. At the same time, that the girls in this game were bolder than the boys suggests that women are not able to contemplate themselves on equal terms with men, but in disguise. Through this playful mimesis, Ismene experiences an authentic sense of herself, which clearly dissonates the social role she performs. Haman was wearing my dress, and it was so much a part of me that I danced under the fountain, that the water poured down on my hair, my shoulders, my cheeks, as if I were crying, he said. Till I got chilled through and felt I'd become a gilded statue of my real self, lit by the moon, facing my father's blind eyes. As natural identities become increasingly suspect, Ismene's reference to her blind father is not negligible, for Oedipus stands for the hero who finds his way to a real identity at a terrible price. Cecity. Links thus between vision and truth, sight and knowledge, appearance and substance clearly break down. What's more, transvestism leads here to a reverse and quite unpredictable metamorphosis. In fact, Ismene's metaphoric transformation into a statue does not respond to a desire to become some kind of insular or supernatural other. On the contrary, it enables a return to a primary or repressed state of being. Easton Newton's fine-theorization of drag as double inversion is here quite instructive, as quoted by Butler in Gender Trouble. At its most complex, drag is a double inversion that says, appearance is an illusion. Drag says, my outside appearance is feminine, but my essence inside is masculine. At the same time, it symbolizes the opposite inversion. My appearance outside is masculine, but my essence inside is feminine. To further trouble vision and metaphysical claims to truth, Ritus borrows on Sophocles by introducing the figure of Tiresias, who is charged, however, with a totally different role. Instead of making known the verdict of the gods to Creon, the seer of Thebes is here revived to tell Ismene the truth about herself. He took me by the chin and lifted my face. You'd be better looking, he told me, if you were a boy. I am, I said. We both laughed like conspirators. As laughter arises in poetic forms, the lack of identification between the actor and the character further clings to the distortion of the writer's own gendered reality in his stage role played by a woman. If this is the case, then the anatomy of the performer proves to be literally male, which reverses the terms, multiplies significations, and suggests a larger fluidity of identities. Furthermore, that it is Tiresias who reveals Ismene's true identity is not incidental, for he appears in a number of narratives as the androgynous myth par excellence. If his androgynous status remains elusive in Ismene, it becomes the very theme of the choral of the same period that reaches titles precisely in Tiresias, where the stage in which both the female and male selves of the seer open up the self to the others within. It thus becomes apparent that Ritus' characters in Ismene reinscribe gender in ways that accentuate its constructiveness and display the grotesque of the whole venture. Unlike her tragic model, Ismene offers a different kind of repetition, which brings together both Butler and Grover and, rigorized politics of mimesis, for both figures have emphasized, in highly derived fashion, and despite their differences, the possibility of shaking the locus from the inside. Is this implosive strategy, however, capable of a radical displacement? Butler is pretty much aware that the performance may challenge, but it will never change, the script of gender. Derrida himself addresses the problem of the place of power, which regularly transforms transgressions into false sortie, as he terms it. In fact, Ritz's female figures seem to fall back into a place, or the crawling house that foregrounds in monologues, to mention the indoor step of the old maid in Chrysosthenes, the mountain sovereignty over Electra's fate, quote, especially on the side of the women's quarters, end quote, the drowning of the woman in black in the kitchen of Moonlight Sonata, or the drowning woman that Ajax hides beneath his own masquerade of masculinity. Unlike Orestes or Philoctetes, is meaning prose incapable of finding the way toward an opening and only addresses a potential of liberation as a condition. If I take off these bracelets, if at night I lay down my hair, if I untie my sandal laces, above all, if I remove these heavy necklaces which clasp my throat like chains, I feel I'll float up, become airborne. I wouldn't want that. Perhaps that's why I wear them. They anchor me in some way, though they're often a burden. I even wear them when sleeping, as though they're a dog that I, myself, have tied to a foreign door. By omitting any reference to Creon's screwed threads, what is more, by silencing his meaning's will to share her sister's fate, as is the case in Sophocles, Ritus focuses on the ways in which his meaning participates in the very terms of her oppression. The move from the tragic to the modern myth is thus marked by the transition from the authoritative figure of the tyrant to modernized disciplinary practices that render the subject docile in ways that recall Foucault's lucid analysis of discipline and punish and resemble the self-censorship imposed by the Judah on authors and publishers following Separation's 1969 statement. Furthermore, that Ritus only refers to the figure of Creon in his grief upon discovering the death of both his wife and son highlights the tyrant's hamartia and subsequent pathos, and leaves no doubt over the question of his skill that animated vivid debates both among scholarship and among sections of Antigone. For Ritus, then, Creon is not rehabilitated. However, his own story develops along a different path, for it is Eumenides' proesis, that is, the burden of her own choices, which invests in her myth with its intensity and passion. His meaning is not a drag, but a fallen queen, lapsed into bad faith, unable of transcending her female condition, she becomes Ritus' tragic hero, par excellence. Perhaps, she says, each one was applied to be something different. Some varied, more or less, others not at all. Fate binds us, they say, on the wheel of the unachievable, leaves us circling the well, in the depths of which there await us, closed in, dark, unresolved, our own face. My sister refused to confess, to submit, hopeless and unyielding. Fatum here does not refer to some kind of transcendental ordering, but rather to a determinism which intersects with material forces and sustains both the necessity of assumed roles in the functioning of society and a vicious historical circularity. Immersed in the inescapability of history or the eternal recurrence of the gender role, his meaning keeps foregrounding fatalism in the face of which the subject remains powerless and political will becomes futile. By contrast, Antigone's deed is giving Ritus an existential edge. On the fragile boundary between the alterable and the inevitable, Antigone was empowered to impact on her own destiny by choosing, quote, the time and the mode of her death, end quote. If there is no reference then to divine laws to raise theological debates, if there's no God left to pull the strings, if nothing to do with Zeus presented to be the main feature of modern drama, then Ritus' tragedy becomes profoundly humanized. Nevertheless, unlike Sartre or Brecht's Comic theatre, Ritus does not seem to put forward a philosophy of praxis in his meaning. Instead, the very form of dramatic monologue evacuates action and accentuates passion. Locked up in individual suffering, his meaning is hardly capable of reaching out to her interlocutor. This further testifies to the committed writer's incapacity to reach out to the spiritual public, as Sartre would have it, the world out of the windows of the city, rejoicing on several occasions with Haman, the power of youth that returns in borrowed clothes throughout the fourth dimension to bring about a change which is most often impossible. In the final stage directions, Ismene takes off the mask, letting appear beneath her aging features, pointing to the themes of time, decline, and death. The highly expressionistic portrayal of the heroine goes hand in hand with an aborted attempt of dialogue and intercourse, for she resists the young officer's siege, defends the portals of her chastity, and conceals her unaccomplished desire in a masquerade. She rises, goes to the mirror, makes herself up again, plaster white, her eyes huge, black circled. A plaster mask. She takes off her dress, puts on one of her sisters. She sinks back in the bed, fully dressed and still wearing her sandals. She closes her eyes. She smiles. Has she fallen asleep? From the hall nearby, the tick of the clock had still been heard. Fatality, thus, is reinvented in the face of self-denial. This open-ended scene clearly recalls the fair death that Ismene herself makes up to bring about the simulacrum of womanness. In her book Antigone's Claim, Butler tries to imagine an alternative symbolic in which Antigone will not have to choose death or life, or, quote, emerging language as a living body entered into a tomb, end quote. Victor similarly opens up one such phase for reflection in which neither Antigone nor Ismene will have to become a living corpse within the vault of their symbolic heteronomy. While myth or the mask makes life on and off the stage in a highly metaphorical way, the masquerade further unsettles the boundaries that demarcate performance from life and unravels new layers of meaning. This kind of distancing, which brings readers close to Brecht's alienation effect, solicits the entry of the reader spectator into the story and enables a critical perspective. In alluding presence, Ismene becomes both a character and a demonstrator. One masks what is being performed behind the scenes. In between the world of appearances and the real one, this modern use of the theatre metaphor blurs the limits between truth and falsity of both gender categories and theatre itself. By presenting life as a form of performance and vice versa, readers moves toward a new realism, which dramatizes the committed writer's enterprises toward the quest of alternative configurations of identity, be it sexual, social, national, ideological, or aesthetic. As Mircea Eliade suggests, myth is a revelation in that it reveals the mystery of the cosmos that would otherwise remain unknown. God, or being, shows itself to us in ways that make myth the ontological foundation of the world. By raising the issue of identity, Ismene's secular mythology becomes precisely an ontophony, which reveals the complexity and plurality of human existence. Reaches a significant digression from Sophocles clearly privileges Ethos over mythos and foregrounds the psychic drama of self-division and alienation. If myth offers a distant writer a mask, the masquerade provides his characters with a language to reconfigure their placement and open up themselves to new possibilities of existence. It gives way to expression to any myth of interiority, being masculine, feminine, or other, which is measured up daily against. Thank you very much.